All right. We're good.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It's just 7 o'clock. Bob Moore, our chair, is unavailable tonight. I think it's possible he may come on later, and that's okay. We'll wish him well and actually wish Diane well. And let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Lucy, do you have your flag? You do. Please stand if you are able. And Lucy, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Item 2 is approval of the agenda. I will accept a motion to approve.
I move approval.
Motion made by Victor. Is there a second? Seconded by Andrew. Any additions? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the agenda, please say aye.
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 Raise your hand. Opposed? Hearing none, I declare it's been passed unanimously. Item 3 is public comment. Brighton, is there any public on line that would like to speak? Oh, Mr. Moore is here.
Keep going. I'm only here for a little while. Keep going.
Okay. Anyone from the public available?
I don't see anybody.
Okay. They can certainly comment at the end of the meeting if they so desire.
Okay.
Item 4 is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting, March 24th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve? Victor, is there a second? Raise your hand. Or Jamie, any corrections or additions to the minutes of March 24th? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of March 24th, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I declare they have passed unanimously.
Abstain.
Oh, I'm sorry, who was abstaining?
Oh, Christine.
Christine, okay, thanks, Christine. Next board meeting is April 7th, 2021, with a 7:30 p.m. Board of Education meeting. Please note the 7:30 piece, because probably for 8 years in a row, I joined at 7 and twiddled my thumbs for half an hour. So, and at 8 o'clock, of course, will be the public hearing on the 2021-2022 education budget. So mark your calendars. And of course, my phone has to ring. Call from 120. Probably my car warranty has expired. So anyway, item 6 will begin discussion, possible vote on amendment to plan of reorganization for Regional School District 13 to permit the closing of John Lyman School. We have a number of people who could start that conversation. I'll throw it out to Doug or perhaps Andrew. Andrew is, of course, chairman of the utilization committee, and we've had some conversation about that. So who would like to give us a synopsis?
Doug, I will let you give us, if you want to, go ahead and give the synopsis. Maybe
Sure.
Any additional information that.
Sure. So I think we first addressed this a couple of board meetings ago after consultation with our attorney. And then we, at utilization, had an executive session with our attorney as well, so that board members could have some more direct interaction. I know a number of board members were part of that meeting last week, but essentially what we are suggesting, recommending as a way to proceed forward on closing John Lyman Elementary School, if the board sees fit to take that action this evening, is to make an amendment to the original charter of the regional school district, which is similar to what happened a couple of years ago. But in this case, instead of requesting from the voters that we have kind of a blanket statement that allows the Board of Education to close any school at any time, simply, by its own standalone action. This would specifically authorize the board to be able to close John Lyman Elementary School, and it would make that change in the charter so that it was clear, and we feel like it'd be very specific to the voters what we were asking them to do. I think the other piece that's important that we learned from our attorneys is that the vote to take place to change the charter, as you all may know, I'm learning things, does require a majority of each town on an independently to make that approval, unlike other votes that simply require a majority of the total number of voters. So I think what's in front of you this evening for discussion and possible vote is that action. And then I also believe, based on conversations we've had, is perhaps, if that action is taken, or even in consideration of that action, a discussion around how we may wish to communicate this decision to our public. And then I believe the third piece that, as of utilization committee, in my mind, was still yet to be determined, and may not need to be determined this evening, but I think the sooner we can determine it, the better we'll be able to proceed forward, is the timing of when we take this action to the voters. My recollection is that there was kind of one group that was advocating for the soonest possible referendum, which might be as early as June or July, meeting all the timelines that we have to meet. And then there was another group that seemed to be advocating for timing this with our regular election cycle in November. And certainly those aren't the only two options. We could really pick any date that we want, but those seem to be the ones that folks were advocating for. And I think it's fair to say we had board members at the time that were advocating for either position on the date. So that's kind of my summary at this point. And I would invite others to correct anything I may have said incorrectly or add things that maybe we need to discuss on this issue that I didn't address.
Are there any further questions, comments?
Victor, can you just mute yourself so it doesn't echo in the background? Thanks.
No, I think, Doug, I think you covered everything that went on in utilization. And I think the basic issue is the timing and, again, the vote to move ahead and to amend the regional plan. The regional plan amendment has a lot of scheduling in it. There's first a draft of the question on the amendment, then there's a report that has to be written that's just substantive and factual, then there's a public hearing, and then there's a schedule for the referendum after that. So there's several steps that has to be taken to get to the point where we're moving forward. So I think you send out a schedule before.
I believe Bob Martino had asked for the information that Matt Ritter, the attorney, had provided. So I believe we sent you that information that he had sent us. And that was a schedule, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, that was anchored to a November decision. And again, we could modify those timelines for a different date if that were the case.
Yes, it was anchored with a November. Matt had presented the example starting with June when the board would vote, but could do it as late as July in order for the timeline to still meet the November ballot.
The other important thing to note is that for the November ballot, it has to be in there 60 days ahead because of the election that's going on at that time. So it's not a 30-day notice for the referendum, it's a 60-day.
When we were on with Matt the other day, did he say that we could not use any board funds to kind of sway anyone after we voted on the referendum date. Was that what he said?
That's exactly right. After you send it to referendum.
So based on the timeline, if we did it for November, we would have until June to kind of get this out there. Is that correct? But if we did it sooner, we would have much less time. Correct?
Correct. Based on Matt's timeline, he based it as a June 9th decision date, but said a July would work too. So after that point, so a vote can be made to send it to referendum, but not setting a date. Once you vote to set the actual date, that's when the timeline kicks in. So you would have probably until June or July.
Okay.
Does anyone want to see the timeline? I can project it. I have it.
Are we allowed to put that up there because it's client privileges with, because that was from our attorney, correct?
I feel safe with the timeline being up there at this point, since we're discussing it openly now. I don't think anything in the timeline itself would constitute the privilege, but thank you for asking that.
No, and that information did not come from the attorney. I believe it came from Bob Yamartino. Did it not?
Nor my recollection was that Bob Yamartino had requested it, and when we sent it to him, we sent it to all of you.
Okay.
So you'd have that copy. That was again something that Matt had sent to Kim and I in preparation for this discussion, and just so people had a sense for what a timeline could look like for a November election.
All right.
So shall I put it up? Does anyone want to see it? Yeah.
I don't know if this is just kind of piggybacking off of Missy's question. So I know that the board cannot, speak or sway or whatever language we want to use, the 60 days, after prior or whatever it is. But the school district, because isn't this similar to like how once we send the budget to referendum, we can't talk about the budget anymore? But like the school district, I mean, if like people have questions or anything like that, they can obviously still approach like the superintendent, the business manager, can the school district as a whole also still put information out there, or is the school district employees also forbidden?
Christine, the legality around this is that once we set the date for the referendum, we just can't dedicate school resources to promotion or anything else in that space. So as that was made very clear that as individuals, you still have all your rights of free speech and everything else. You can do, you can say whatever you want to about it. But from a board standpoint, we just can't dedicate school resources to that, which would mean we can't send out mailers that had a particular position on the thing. Like that.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasize, Andrew, it's the board cannot use resources to express positions. We can use resources to provide information, and probably should.
And we do
And
that
that begins.
Budget. We send out the budget flyer.
If I could jump in here, that's correct. And I think what would happen in the scenario where we'd pass the date after which we could not expend resources or take a position, if we wanted to put anything out at that point that was kind of, in our minds, neutral and kind of fact-based, our attorneys would be happy to review that before we publish it to make sure that it kind of meets that standard, because I think it is, knowing that the board is advocating for a certain position, I think we would just have to be very careful with anything we laid out, that it wasn't viewed as kind of leading people. And you all have all seen that type of advertisement and running up to an election where it purports itself to be a fact-based comparison, but through infographic and just the way it convinces people, it's obviously trying to lead people to make one decision versus the other. And we would just be very thoughtful and careful and have our attorneys guide us through that process.
Thank you.
We've discussed the wording of a possible question, a referendum question, but we haven't really talked about the wording that we're going to put into the document itself. I don't believe we have, and don't we need to do that as well? Or is, I don't know, because I'm looking at the copy that was just recently sent to us, but what's on here is the information that was on for the first referendum we already had that did not pass. So this is not correct. It's bold, so we know what it is, but this is not correct.
I had that sent out just so you know what we did last time. It's not what we would use for this thing. We need to have a smaller and more precise language, and
Right.
we could rewrite the history if we wanted to. We could do a whole lot of stuff, but really the question is, shall we amend the board amend the regionalization plan by this session? I mean, you could fit it in one of the paragraphs. It could be separate, and Matt would help us, figure out how to actually write that language so it's the most specific.
Okay, and I believe the second part of what we need to do is to decide if we're going to utilize any additional support in order to get the information out to the public. And I thought that was part of what we were going to be discussing tonight. Am I correct?
Lucy, we're prepared to do that, but the way my brain processes this, and if this is not the right way to go about it, then you tell me, is that until you all vote that this is what we're actually doing, I think the conversation about how to communicate or if we're going to expend resources is kind of academic at this point. But if you wish to have all the discussion first and then take all the actions, we can certainly do that. I think I emailed you all. We have Aaron and Kristen from Thought Exchange here, and they're prepared to give a presentation about how they think they could assist us with this communication. But I was kind of holding off until you all decided when you wanted to get that introduced into tonight's discussion.
And just to move the process along from that standpoint and everything else, does it make sense now just to break this up into 2 or 3 parts? So the first part is we just make a vote on putting this, making a plan amendment change. 2, then we kind of have a discussion around the timing of when that referendum is going to happen. And then 3, then we can discuss about resource utilization for PR purposes and everything else. I think if we do that, we can just move through this process. I think we have a lot of agreement with 1, maybe less so with 2, not sure about 3, but that would kind of move us along here tonight. Because I'm like Lucy, I would like to get to number 3, because I think we need to start that process. But I agree, Doug, that we need to do these other things first.
Could we look at the schedule again? Would it be all right if I put it up and we just look at the various goal points that are set there?
Well, I'm just hoping that we can just go ahead and vote on the plan amendment first, and then we can discuss the timing issue.
Yeah, so that is step 1, to vote on the proposed amendment of the plan, and to schedule, that's item 1 in this projection, and to schedule a district meeting. So on this plan, that's June 9. I'm not clear why that's a deadline, but that's June 9 in Bob's plan. So that means, yeah. Well, Bob, there you are.
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. This is not my plan.
We already figured that out, Bob, surprisingly enough.
Sorry, Bob.
I joined a little late. I'm not sure exactly what I missed, but the timing on the vote, this, I think what I'm looking at is what was, or was this a revised one to show a June referendum? Is that what this was?
No, Bob, this is the same thing that I sent you and the other board members. It's simply what Matt had sent to Kim and I kind of ahead of all this discussion, with one possible timeline that's anchored to a November referendum, but we can certainly modify that.
Right. So this was in anticipation of the November referendum for the vote. But if we're going to discuss timing second, so is there already a motion on the floor to accept the, or is there not a motion yet?
There is no motion on the floor, Bob.
All right, so the background information that was given was basically that, I'm sorry, I joined a few minutes late. So the actual information at this point was just that we had the meeting, and the long and the short of it is we're going to have to separate, or it's suggested that we separate both items, both the funding for any potential capital to improve Lyman, as well as separating the vote to close the school, potential vote to close the school. Is that right? That's already been set up.
We didn't even talk about funding parts. The only thing we've been talking about is just the language within the regional plan amendment.
Okay, so the public doesn't necessarily know how we got to this point at this point, right?
No, we're just trying to establish, I think at this point, whether we're going to move forward with this. And that's why I just think we need to go ahead and vote so that we can then say, we can start talking about these other things.
All right. Well, if we can just step back, one step back, not a huge step back, but we're at a situation, and I think we need to make sure we set this up correctly. Since we had voted several years ago to close John Lyman, and then on the bond council, we were asked to that we needed to amend our referendum, our plan document. When we went out to vote on that, it was voted down. And because it was voted down, that left the school district. We no longer have the authority, or we do not have the authority to close John Lyman School. We also know that we have delayed much needed improvements to John Lyman for several years, anticipating that we were going to close it. We're now at a point where we need to make a decision. The board and the community needs to make a decision. Do we want to fund improvements, that all of the repairs to John Lyman School, or do we not want to do that, and do we want to close it down? Because really, we have to do both. We have to do one or the other. We can't continue to run the school and not fund the improvements. So that led to a lot of questions. So the very first question is, can we just put a straight vote to the voters? Well, first of all, as a board, we could just say, we don't want to close John Lyman. Let's fund all the repairs and just put that out for a vote. I think the board still has the intentions of wanting to close John Lyman for many reasons, which we will enumerate later. And so in order to do that, the question is, how do we go about closing it? Is it a single referendum question to the taxpayers? And majority, it was determined that it has to be a plan amendment. It has to go out to referendum, and it has to be approved in both towns. So if we, the board, still have the inclination to close John Lyman, we have to allow the voters to make that decision, because that decision is not ours to make. And so I think that's where we are now, Andrew. Is that right? This is the point we're at now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So that.
Can I interrupt? I'm really sorry, but I feel like we're just like rehashing stuff, and now this is just going to go on for like hours on end, like we normally do. And
No,
I really
Christine.
think Andrew's suggestion was really good. Like, let's break it into pieces so that, because I think all what you're saying,
Okay.
Bob, is really valid, but we,
Christine.
like, let's do the vote, then let's do the timeline, then let's talk about
Okay.
communication.
Yes, but Christine, it's very important that we lay out this background, because the last time we had a discussion about this, there was a lot of social media saying, we're trying to sneak this through. We're trying to backdoor this. We're not trying to be open
There
and
will still be
transparent.
that, Bob, though. There
I
still
get
will.
it. I get it. I just want it to be very clear so that the public has an understanding of why we're discussing this tonight and how we would go forward. So based on what Andrew said about breaking it up, I heard that part. I'm fully in agreement with it. I think before we discuss it any further, I think there should be a motion and a second on the floor. Then we can have the discussion. So I'll make a motion, unless someone else would like to make a motion, that the board moves forward to put a referendum question before the public to close John Lyman School.
Okay, motion made by Bob Yamartino. Is there a second?
Second.
I think the.
Motion made and seconded. Bob, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think the motion really needs to be, do we want to amend the regional plan of District 13 to allow for the closure of Lyman School?
Okay, Bob, I'll withdraw my motion. Bob, you make that motion.
I just
Bob?
amended.
You have the text in front of you. I don't.
Actually, I don't. I'm running back and forth with hospital care here. So I think the motion has to be, shall we amend the regional District 13 regional plan to allow for the closure or provide for the closure of Lyman School? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to amend the plan and then go out to a hearing on that and then to referendum. So we don't have to vote referendum. We just have to vote for getting the plan amendment written.
Okay.
Okay, someone has a TV on. Thank you. Bob, would you care to repeat that?
Shall the Board of Education amend the regional District 13 regional plan to provide for the closure of Lyman School in Middlefield?
And you're submitting that as a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second? Seconded by Victor. Is there discussion? Is there a discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion presented by Bob Moore, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? I hear none in opposition, therefore that motion has passed unanimously. Now, next, Andrew suggested having a conversation about the timing of the activities leading up to the referendum.
Yeah, I think Bob Moore kind of already articulated that, and Doug did as well. I think that there's these two options we have for moving forward kind of almost immediately with kind of the process, although the process takes time, or kind of moving this to the November election kind of period of time. So it'd be just nice to hear people's general thoughts on this area.
Is there discussion?
So we had a discussion at the utilization meeting, and I know many of us were there. I think, in my opinion, that we should wait until November, just because A, it will give us time to get our message out and get the information out, and B, it's going to give us the greater amount of voters. Like, had we had time to do it for May, I would have said, yes, totally, let's do it for May, but we don't have that time. And I'm just afraid that if I don't know that rush is the right word, but if we do this too quickly, we're not going to have time to get our message out and get all the information out. And then if, the vote comes in the summer, people may be away or on vacation, and you're also not going to get the greater amount of voters. And more than likely, you're going to get the people who are against it coming out to vote.
This is Bob. I generally
My-
generally in favor of going to the November time period.
I actually am in favor of moving it up and having it sooner than later. And the reason for that is there's several reasons. One deals with the fact that once we complete this process of getting the vote to close Lyman, or if we get a vote to not close Lyman, we have to make other decisions and start moving forward. For instance, if we vote to keep Lyman open, we then have to go to referendum for the capital to do that. And since much of the capital we will ask for, we will be seeking reimbursement from the state. The state deadline is November 15th to file. If we miss that, then we're waiting for May 15th of the next year to file to get so it just delays the construction at least 2 to 3 years. And I really don't feel comfortable leaving John Lyman School running without that construction completed. Conversely, if John Lyman is voted to close, there may be a need for the capital to do some improvements to the receiving schools. We would be in the same situation that we wouldn't be able to get that capital approved until at the earliest December, which puts us past the state deadlines for filing for reimbursement. So again, we don't get the reimbursement. Also, if we are going to close the school, there is a potential organization, the Meriden Hills Baptist Church, that wants to acquire John Lyman School to make it a K-12 school, and I think also house their parish church there. And so with any real estate deal, if you have a willing buyer of the property and you delay it long enough, they're going to find an alternative property to make their home. And it'd be a shame for us to have another school potentially sitting idle like corn. So that said, again, I would urge that we do it sooner than later. And I know that people speculate that you will get no turnout or low turnout if it's in the summertime. However, I would remind people that the referendum for the acquisition of Powder Ridge by the town of Middlefield happened I think it was August, and it had a 50% voter turnout. So again, I think if the issue is pertinent enough to enough people, and we get the word out, we can get people to come out. I also don't know that looking at the timing, if it's got to be July or August, I'm not sure if we expedited the process, actually make it an end of June type of vote. Because I think we only need 30-day notice once we post for referendum, which means we have all of April and all of May to get the rest of the work done prior to that, and we could have it at the end of June. So that's my viewpoint.
I will say I would probably say I'm a little on the fence, but I would lean more towards November, because what I kind of go back to is that, this is about our community and getting people out to vote. And I think we obviously have the highest likelihood of the highest turnout for November. And I think that's what's important. And I do think we obviously have made some mistakes in the past. And I think bringing on like a PR firm, I'm sure we'll hear about soon, I think is a good idea, and it will make the process a bit more thoughtful, and hopefully people will begin to truly understand what's happening in the community, instead of, making like assumptions or just kind of reading one bit of information. I think they really need to understand the full picture. But if we collectively as a group decide we wanted to bump it up to September or something, I'm not saying I'm against it. I just feel like we really want to get the largest turnout possible.
Anyone else with some thoughts?
I'm inclined to go with a later date. I won't specifically mention November or September, because I think it's, aside from getting as much of a turnout as possible, I think it's really critical to get the information out to the public the right way this time, and as much as possible, and as widespread as possible, so that people at least are better informed, because it's got a history. If it hadn't already had a history and it hadn't been voted on before, that's different, but it already has. So you already have people out there with a mindset either way. And I think we owe them the service to really put out the information, the details as to what their decision means to the district. Either way, what the decision means. And I just think that's a critical piece. And I think we need time to do that.
Yeah, Lucy, I would agree with that. And I think with a little later date, it's going to give us a very clear picture of the pulse of the two towns to direct us on how to proceed. I know we've put things out before. We've gone a long time. The Corn School issue has been hanging out there, seemingly forever. I don't think my grandson was born when we talked about Corn School yet. So nonetheless, with time, it's easier to use a long period of time than it is to do a short period of time. And maybe the public will consider this a knee-jerk reaction. So I'm inclined to agree with you, Lucy, and Christine as well, and Missy.
My other concern is that
Missy, go ahead.
if we're going to hire, if we're not just going to go with Thought Exchange, which I'm excited to hear about, but if we're going to hire a PR firm, that's not going to happen overnight. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something we have to go out to bid for, or even if we talk to a couple different people. I mean, tomorrow is April 1st. So in my mind, that's not something that we're going to even necessarily have solidified by next week. And so then I feel like we need the time to do it right and get the best information out there so people can make the best decision and most informed decision.
Anyone else want to join the conversation? Is there anyone willing to make a motion?
Well, I hadn't considered September or October. If it were in September, it may give us some chance to get another vote in October, or it would be very challenging to get the authorization for capital expenditure, to get that on a referendum question in November. It's not impossible, but it's a little challenging because the people eligible to vote on a referendum for capital improvements for bonding is a different cohort, different population than those that are eligible to vote on the plan amendment. Plan amendment can only be voted on by residents or registered voters in a town, where the referendum for capital improvements can be voted on by those same voters, plus anyone that pays taxes in town on property. So I guess I'd be interested to hear people's view on September or October, as opposed to July or August and November.
I thought that Matt said if we were going to do a referendum for November, that it would have to be noticed by Labor Day. And so if we had the vote in September or October for this, we wouldn't have had time to notice the referendum for November.
The plan amendment notice. You're right. We probably wouldn't, but we could probably, if we did one in September, we could do the other in October. Or we could notice, essentially, we could notice, if we notice like September 1st or 2nd, we could still meet the deadline. That Matt
And just
has put
remember
out.
that every time we have a vote that's not on a voting day already, it's costing money. Correct? I mean, I don't know how much, but it's, if you're not having it in May when you're voting on the school budget, and you're not having it on election day when you're voting for other things, because now you're talking about having 2 elections on days that aren't already election days.
Yeah, I do know from experience working on a board of finance that you budget for off-year elections, where you don't have primaries. You budget differently for the ones where you do have primaries, but then you also budget in a buffer in case, like we've had happen before, that the school budget gets voted down and needs to have additional referendums. The towns usually handle those, and if they don't, it's not a huge expense, and it's usually handled out of the contingency line items. So while I am concerned about the expenses, I'm not overly concerned. I think it's more important we get the timing right and the messaging right.
One of the things that I think is that we're trying to guess how long this takes. I would suggest that we have our end date, have our work done so that we can get on the November ballot. But as we look with the public relations and all the other things, if we can do it sooner, we can reschedule, we can work for a schedule that gets us sooner. But until we know how much work we're going to have to do to get the information out, it may take, it may require us to go right, to November, just by the time we hire somebody and the time we collect the information that's needed. So, maybe the thing to do is to say, we have we'll get it done so that at the latest it will be on the November ballot.
The thing that concerns me about the Durham vote in November, there's nobody really up for re-election. Like Laura is not an election year, right? She's in a 4-year term situation. So it might be a low year anyway for turnout. So thinking that, okay, November is going to be the best time to do it, I don't know if it really is. There's no state reps up for, there's no state senators.
There's 4 Board of Ed members up, Jamie.
Yes, but
People are going
the
to
governmental thing, we're not the top of the ticket, put it that way. Okay. So I don't know how well the voter turnout is going to be in November. Middlefield, Ed is up, right, Bob? Ed is up for a vote this in November.
Yes, your boards of selectmen, there'll be members of the boards of finance, and I think assessor will be up. So yeah, there'll be regular town elections. Yeah.
If I can jump in for 1 second too, just a couple of points I'm thinking, and this could be impactful, might not be, but 2 things. I know that there is sort of a lockout period on the voter machines, so we would need to make sure if we were to have a referendum prior to the November, we'd need to give enough time for those machines to be locked out for enough time for them to be used again. Could just be 30 days, might be all it is. I'd have to check that. And my second point is, now that we are going to be voting at Coginchaug and Middlefield votes at Memorial, if we do it in September, we're going to have kids in school. So that would be another factor of having the public. Typically election day, we don't have school, so we can use those buildings. So just a couple thoughts to think about.
I'll make a motion to, I don't know the right wording to say. I want to do it in November on election day. Norm, help me with my words.
I think we know where you're going, Missy. So Missy has made a motion to hold the referendum at the November elections. Is there a second?
Wait, could I just remark that if we
Sure.
make a motion to hold a referendum, I believe we are then prevented from using board funds for for advancing our agenda. What we need is a motion to adopt a schedule to allow.
That does sound better, Victor. Really, you're not restricted from board funds until you actually set an actual date and send the actual question too. So we don't even have the question on the plan amendment yet, but a schedule would be much better choice of words.
All right, I'll take back what I said, and I'll make a new motion to plan for the referendum to amend the document of the Regional School District 13 to be done at the November election. Is that better?
I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion made and seconded.
Are you asking for discussion?
I am putting it out there, Bob, discussion of an official nature.
I would prefer what Bob had said, which was to assess what it would take to get to the point, and that I'd rather change the wording to be no later than November, so that if in the future we decide that a September or October vote might be more beneficial, we still have that option.
Yes, I do agree with that too, because one of the questions I was going to ask is if we go ahead with the motion we have on the floor, does that mean that we're tied to November for the referendum, or what if we are ready to go sooner? Are we not going to be able to do that? So I did agree with what Bob Moore had said about no later than November.
But because we said plan for, like, it's just a schedule, we haven't actually set the date. Is that okay, Norm?
I think so, because what the attorney said, the problem is if it becomes date specific, then we start looking at that 60-day window.
Yeah, so
we have to backtrack.
Yeah, so if we said we're just planning for this, obviously, then that gives us flexibility to change it. If we decide by, June, like, oh, wow, we really have made really good progress, we could bump this up if we wanted, we would have that flexibility to do so based on the current motion.
I think so.
I would rather amend the motion. I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion to say no later than November, the November election. I think it's November 3rd is the election date. Is that right?
So here is wording. Develop a plan to hold a referendum for amending the RSD13 regionalization agreement no later than November 2021. No other detail is necessary, I believe.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I am as well. Do we have to second? Did you put that motion out?
Who made the, well, now I'm going back because I wasn't keeping track, unfortunately.
I'll withdraw my motion, but I'm not, the flexibility kind of scares me a little bit. Like, I'd rather have a concrete thing going on.
Unfortunately, Melissa, I think that locks us out of some sort of public relations program that we might come up with.
What does?
I'm sorry, what locks us?
So, yeah, I'm confused.
There's no specific date and no specific proposal in this motion. It doesn't even say what sort of amendment it would be. So it can't lock us out.
Correct. I agree with that, Victor.
Okay, since Missy withdrew her motion, Victor, you made that motion?
if there are no other motions on the floor, I move the motion which I have just read and which I am projecting.
I would second that.
All right, there were no motions on the floor because they were withdrawn. So Victor has made a motion. Bob Y has seconded the motion. Is there discussion of an official nature?
Can you reread it, please?
Victor, would you reread it? Or
Yes, I will. I will reread it. The motion is to develop a plan to hold a referendum for amending the RSD13 regionalization agreement no later than November 2021.
And that motion has been made and seconded.
Can I just want to point out that this motion effectively accomplishes nothing as far as the discussion about whether we were going to move forward with a short timetable or the November timetable. We basically, according to this language, we haven't solved that issue. Everybody agreed that it was going to be, the latest date was going to be November. So I don't see a reason why we should vote on that. I think we should plan again for November. That's the way the language should be. That allows us to be able to set timetables effectively and carry out discussions with the PR firms. If we do happen to, by some miracle, get all of this accomplished in a month or 2-month time frame, and we are satisfied with the public discussion, sure, we can do something sooner. But I would rather see a definitive date on the actual motion. And I was much more in favor of the first motion that was made from Missy at the time.
If I could just respond, Andrew, no later than is a specific commitment.
Right,
no later than is a specific commitment.
Commitment that everybody already had already. What I was hoping we would accomplish tonight was whether we could start knowing whether we need to kick it into extremely high gear and have the PR firm at our door the next day, or whether we have some time to actually go out and get, make some decisions about PR and other types of things. I think those are important, and we need to know the timetable behind that. And so
Andrew, I think the time for kicking it into high gear is here, regardless of when we're having the vote. I think the time to have kicked it into high gear was back in January or December of last year. I think we have taken our time, not excessive amount of time, but I think we should have been having dialogues with PR firms. We should have had them on retainer by the first of this year. And I've said this before, not just for this specific issue. We have other issues that could come up, and how best to communicate it to the public. How best to communicate what the board sentiment is to the public. I mean, we should already have this in place, and we don't. So, and if we say, oh, we got plenty of time because it's in November, well, guess what? We'll start working on it in July and August and miss our opportunity to get the communications out. I think we kick it into high gear now, do the best we can. And like Bob said, we can start to get a read on what the community feels. I think the time is upon us.
I'm just going to voice my opinion like I did last time, that I feel like the most effective date for us to make this referendum and schedule is November. I think the points made by Missy and others that it maximizes voter participation in the process, I think is a point well taken. I don't really see strong rationales other than the potential of the building being purchased by some process that we don't even really know and have a direct commitment about. And I think we get one other shot with this. And I'm in favor of a plan that maximizes the chances of success. And I think the November plan is the right plan. And I don't want to come back here in a month and for people to start pushing forward to move this up and I don't think we're going to get a good read from the public perspective on what the right option is. Because if we took that logic, the last time everybody felt great that it was going to get passed. Clearly, you know, what everybody was hearing in the public wasn't the right thing because it didn't pass, and it was voted down heavily. So I don't think you can accurately gauge the public in those ways. And I think the way to maximize public participation in the process is to move for the November date. And I think that's the best way to get a fair representation from our voters on a super, super important issue for both towns.
Andrew, I will put out right now to the public, there's no way that I would rush the process, because to be honest with you, I did not believe it was going to pass when it went out the first time, and it didn't. So, and I'm really concerned that it may not pass this time. So I personally would like to make sure that enough information gets out, the right information gets out, and enough time is out there for people to be able to make an informed decision, and one that isn't emotionally involved, one that makes a lot of sense with facts. So I would never, I'll tell you right now, I would not be one that would push to make it go any faster.
So Andrew, a couple of points. One is I do agree with Lucy that I would want to make sure that the information got out there and that it was accurate. I did not feel it was going to pass. And you have contested on many occasions when I've told you why I think it failed in both towns, because I was following social media pretty closely and we had been advised by our attorneys that we did not have the right to even comment once we voted for it to go to referendum. So for 2 months leading up to that vote, I sat on my hands watching the social media basically tear apart what we were trying to accomplish and sending out so much disinformation. It was ridiculous. And we weren't able to comment on it, which is why I said before we even entertained this discussion tonight, I've been harping on, we need to get a communication plan in place that involves a firm that can monitor social media, can tell us what we should be responding to and what we should not be responding to, how best to communicate it, what methods, newspaper, print, radio, TV, whatever, and I'm sure we're not going to go TV and radio, but so I did not feel comfortable it was just going to pass. So, and I would want to make sure we maximize our opportunity for success in moving this forward. And I feel very strongly about that. I also strongly believe that at this point, the decision completely lies with the taxpayers and the voters. And we don't get a say in that other than to put out the facts of why we're trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And then it's up to them. And once they make that decision, we have a whole bunch of decisions we're going to have to make. If it's open, what does the grade configuration look like? How do we make sure we maintain the integrity of our programs going forward? If it is to be closed, how does that move forward? And I think the sooner that we get an answer to that, which is why I was advocating for sooner rather than later, I think we can start getting to our job, which is to actually run the Board of Education. So that's where I'm coming from. And if it's a November election, it's a November election. But if there's an opportunity that we feel comfortable, all the messages are out there and that people are ready, I'm okay with the September and October. I'll give up on June, July, and August at this point, based on what I heard. But I would still prefer sooner than later. And therefore, I firmly stand by what Victor had made as a motion.
I guess I don't see the point of doing September or October if we're not going to be able to put a referendum out for, if it doesn't pass and we keep the building open. If we do it in September or October, we're not going to have time to notice the referendum to do it in November. Correct?
We may not, but on the flip side of that, Missy, will have all that much more time to put the next communications together for whatever that referendum is. We'll also have opportunity to start making plans and arrangements to either close or starting to submit for bids for contractors to do the improvements. There's a lot of things we can do that, again, we're shortening that horizon on when we can do that kind of work.
I just don't see what 1 or 2 months is, what the big difference is going to be. Because if we're really, say, you know, it does pass and we close it and we have to make, you know, that much improvement to Brewster, I'm not in favor of having major construction be done not in the summer. I mean, I just think that would be very disruptive to the children.
And if the first we can start talking about what the improvements are is December, then there will be no construction in that summer, and it's the following summer. And I'm still concerned about going, at this point, 2 more winters through with John Lyman in the condition it's in. That's where I'm at.
Again, I just look at this as a cost benefit analysis, and I just think from a risk standpoint, the best thing to do is for us to bring it in November and just move forward on that approach. I don't think that we should be trying to rush the process to save a month or 2. I think we should be trying to maximally communicate with all of our voters and to ensure the success of what we want to happen from this board's perspective.
All right, can we call the vote, Norm?
On the floor.
Can we call a vote on the motion?
If that's your prerogative.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
You may.
If the way that it's written now is not a specific timeline per se, but if we put a date on it, that means that we have noticed it, and then that means that we can't hire a PR firm. Am I understanding that correctly, or am I confused?
I believe that's our common understanding of what the attorney told us. But
how I see this here is you still have to basically you have to agree on what the question is going to be or what the change to the plan amendment is going to be. And then once you have agreed on that, then you have to send that question for a definitive referendum date. So this vote is just what is the question going to be, and we're going to send it for referendum no later than November 2021. That does not start the clock ticking on the district resources. Until you say November 2nd, 2021, and it gets approved, that's when it starts ticking.
And at that point, as you said before, Kim, the specific items to go to resolution have to be decided. In other words, you call a vote to approve a referendum which has already been worded. So we're so far from that it's kind of unbelievable. I can't tell whether the earth is flat or round looking at that from here.
The way I'm looking at this question, it's really just a majority of your preferences. This is sort of an internal vote to decide what the consensus of the board is and how to move forward. This is not sending it to referendum. So this isn't even probably a required motion for referendum. It's just to get something that you're all going to agree on what the kind of timing is.
If I could jump in there too, onto what Kim said, I think the reason why knowing the timeline, and again, I would say specific is better than the larger window that's kind of out there right now, is if we're going to engage a PR firm, I think their first question is going to be what is the timeline? So there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg going on here. But even, let's say we're not right away engaging a PR firm, it would sure be nice to go out and let people know when we think this vote is going to take place and start communicating that kind of early and often, as the expression goes, through our formal communication and even through our informal communications. So I think having a sense on where the board sits on this issue is important, and I think I can hear it Again, I still think I'm hearing two camps. I think I'm hearing November is the date and the reasons why, and then another group saying, well, I'm okay with November, but if there was a possibility to do it in October or September, maybe that would be a little bit better if we had time to go through that. I wonder though, as we engage perhaps with a PR firm, if the lack of clarity about what our target date is might not actually slow them down or make them come back to us in a month or two and say, we can't put a schedule together unless we know when this vote's taking place.
And conversely, that same PR firm could say, we can ask the question, which is a question I have, is what does it take to get up and running for them? So then we can make an informed decision on a date. So again, it's a chicken and an egg, which is why having delayed it is probably not the right thing. And Melissa, regarding the 60 days notification on the referendum, I think that is for the plan amendment. I'm not sure that goes for a bonding referendum. I think 30 days is the bonding referendum requirement, which is why I didn't really want to say, yeah, we're definitely iced out. I think we'd need another, clarification from our attorney on that. So, so that's why I'm saying we got two camps. Why don't we just take a vote, see which camp wins, and we'll go forward with whatever the decision is of the board, the majority.
Just one clarification, Bob, the reason for the 60 days is because that's the municipal election time frame, not the referendum on the plan amendment, which could happen less.
Yes, because that's the Secretary of State's requirement. Right. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Well, there is a motion on the floor. Are we ready for a vote?
I'll call the question.
If there's no further discussion, we can move ahead. Well, you know what? It's non-debatable. Victor's called the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to call the question. That's not debatable. All those in favor of calling the question, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One in opposition. Therefore, the motion carries. We proceed to the vote on the motion. Victor, would you put that up on the screen again? Motion is to develop a plan to hold a referendum for amending the RSD13 regionalization agreement no later than November 2021. Is everybody clear on the motion? All right, all those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. I have 6. And myself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? Raise your hand. 2. The vote is 7-2. The motion has passed.
It's
I
3.
think the vote was 7-3.
7-3.
I didn't see who was the third?
Missy, Christine, and Andrew.
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew's in the dark, so I didn't see his hand. Really? His picture's darker than everybody else's, so it's probably the new chin hair.
Yeah, probably.
All right, the motion is passed. Now, the third thing that we had discussed is to talk about resources. Where would we like to go on this?
Has proposal.
Bob, could you say that again?
I think Doug has got folks from the firm with him here and probably ready to talk about it.
Okay. Doug?
Yeah, thank you, Norm. And so again, I think I emailed you this yesterday or the day before. As Kim and I have heard comments from board members around this issue and thinking that we would get to this place, we wanted to make sure, as you consider how best to communicate around this issue, and again, I've heard the term PR firm thrown out a lot of times, kind of tongue in cheek. In my experience, what we're talking about here is strategic communication, and that can be achieved in a number of ways. Because in my opinion, what we're trying to do is get our message out and get it out as broadly and as widely and as clearly as possible to let the voters make an informed decision and then feel good about supporting whatever decision they make, whether it's the one we advocate for or not. So what I've discovered during my transition is that the school district is under contract with a company called Thought Exchange. And I will let Aaron and Kristen kind of explain that a little bit more, but just to kind of set it up, my understanding is that they have a history with Dr. Serino and Regional School District 13 in previous work. And I'm also familiar with their work through colleagues, and it's reputable work. It's a crowdsourcing platform. And so our discussions with Aaron and Kristen have, first of all, I think it's important for you and the public to know that if they are to assist us in this effort in any way, whether they do it kind of standalone or in combination with a strategic consultant or a PR firm, whatever we call it, there won't be any additional expenses on their end. They're under kind of an annual contract with us. So there really is no danger in, I think, listening to what they have to say and seeing if you believe its value and is appropriate in this circumstance. And the other piece is that we as a staff are also willing to do whatever we can do in our capacity to try to communicate. But we don't want to do that if the board doesn't wish us to. I've talked to a few of you about, I think on a very simple term, crafting a short 5 to 10 minute video. It could be as simple as I interview Kim and we record and we just kind of frame the issue and trying to get that message out as early as possible. I think would be a good first step. And again, maybe not the only step we take, but let me kind of back away from that and just turn things over to either Aaron or Kristen to kind of, first of all, explain the Thought Exchange platform and let you all kind of see that. And I've asked them to take no more than 10 to 15 minutes on that, and then to open the floor for discussion, questions for you to them, or maybe questions from them to you about what it is you think maybe they could do to help us in these efforts. So Aaron, Kristen, take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for letting us hang out with you and be a bit of a fly on the wall here for the last little bit. I'll just take a moment to introduce myself and I'll pass it to Kristen. So my name is Erin Moore. I'm an account manager with Thought Exchange, and I have been working with RSD13 for the past 2 years, just about, with Dr. Serino. And my main goal is I'm now working with Doug as we look ahead to strategically align goals and initiatives that are important to you folks, being the board, and all of the district stakeholders. So I'll pass it over to Kristen and she can take a moment to introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Erin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Prevost. I am a customer success manager here at Thought Exchange, and I have been the CSM for RSD13 for the last year. My role as CSM is to ensure that new leaders are confident and comfortable launching exchanges and getting the most out of the tool.
Awesome, thank you. So like Doug said, we'll just take about 10 to 15 minutes. We really want to just show you a little bit about why Thought Exchange, sort of who we are, what we do, how we help and support school districts, and where we might fit in terms of supporting the referendum coming up that you've been discussing. And then we'll take a few minutes to have you actually experience the tool itself so you can know a little bit more about what we're talking if you're new to this and you haven't seen Thought Exchange before. So I'm going to go share my screen here. Give me 1 second while I do so. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Great. Okay. So Thought Exchange is an essential tool for leaders who need to solve complex problems and get stakeholders aligned quickly. So we help you have an important discussions across many stakeholder groups, whether that's internal or external, and both, in a way that equitably includes a variety of perspectives, scales easily, and is fast. Mouse jumping here, there we go. So why thought exchange? Well, thought exchange gives you a way to have constructive conversation with groups across your district to get a holistic view of challenges, gaps, and potential solutions. You also get an opportunity to hear honest, comprehensive feedback on what's going well, what issues, strategic, operational, or cultural, are most important for groups across the district. And our rich analytics and visualizations help you identify top themes and priorities and discover standout ideas so that you can propel forward and inform your next steps. So here's what makes thought exchange different from tools that you may be familiar with. We solve for the typical meeting experience when you're only hearing from the loudest person in the room, or online forum these days, or even perhaps social media presence. We also give people in an exchange an opportunity to be expressed to other people's thoughts and ideas, allowing them to learn something new or consider a different perspective. When you think about polls, particularly when it comes to getting buy-in for an approach or plan, giving people context and exposure to what others felt strongly about is super helpful. Maybe they don't agree with your decision, but they can still support your initiative because they understand how you ended up where you are and or understand the perspectives involved to get you to that decision. And then unlike anything else, we also help you make data-driven decisions. We'll show you responses to questions in order of what people are most and least aligned with, or what they think is most relevant, so you can prioritize what matters most and allocate resources effectively and efficiently. So we've been around for about 10 years, and we're helping education leaders in over 500 school districts across North America. We've learned a lot in that time, especially in the past year of COVID as well. And we have the expertise to guide you through how to tackle some of the hardest, challenging positions that you find yourself in based on what we've seen work well with other customers, which funnel into these three primary buckets. So if we look at aligned strategy, the first is really about getting support and buy-in on the district strategy. This means collecting input, getting alignment on top priorities, whether it be from curriculum, facilities, staff enrollment, school closures, and securing these resources to support those. So think budget, bonds, facilities, and capital projects. When thinking about the school closure, for example, there's an opportunity here to use thought exchange to understand how well informed the community is on why the referendum is taking place, by asking what their thoughts and questions are, and then by even being able to further inform and fill those gaps. We also help you surface the best solutions to common challenges stakeholders feel across the district that they might be facing, be it students or parents or staff, and using thought exchange to have conversations at scale with specific stakeholder groups, not just in the lead up to a vote in this case, for example, but also afterwards to achieve that operational excellence while in the midst of massive change. And finally, building alignment and trust with both internal stakeholders of the district and the broader community, while instilling a sense of ownership and partnership as you work through complex decisions together. So I'm going to pass it over here to Kristen here in a moment to bring us through a live exchange, and we'll share what that is on the screen. So if you have, we'll drop a link here in a moment, or if you have a mobile device handy, you'll need that. But I wanted to pause for a moment just to see if there's one or two questions that are top of mind that they're burning and you want to say, and we can happily hold some space at the end as well. Okay, I will carry on here and pass it over to you, Kristen, and I'll share my screen as well again.
Thank you, Erin. All right, so instead of talking to you about how thought exchange works, let's all participate in one. There are two ways in which you can run an exchange in a live setting like this or asynchronously. So with an asynchronous exchange, for example, you're going to send a link to your stakeholders, and then they participate over the course of a few days in the comfort of their own home, office, school, anywhere really. The only requirement is access to a device like a computer or a smartphone, and access to the internet. So Erin and I want to keep this exchange tonight light and positive, and we're inviting everyone to participate. So we want to know, with everything that has changed over the last year, what's your silver lining? In fact, we encourage you to add as many thoughts as you'd like. Think about the things that you would like to see carried over into the next school year. Think about your personal and family life. Think about society and the world at large. What are the silver linings in the last year? So it's important to note that your identity will not be associated with your thoughts. So after you're done adding thoughts, you're then going to read, consider, and rate the thoughts of others based on how much you agree or disagree. It's the collective ratings that will help prioritize where we focus our time, energy, and attention. And it also highlights what you value most as a group, as a community, as a district. Your identity will also not be associated with the ratings that you assign. This is really meant to be a safe, productive, bias-free way to have quick, efficient discussions at scale. So I have already dropped the link in the chat for those of you who have access to the chat. If you have a smartphone by your side, you can open the camera and point it at the QR code. I'm seeing those numbers increase at the top there. So a lot of you have already figured it out. It's quite easy. One more way to join, just to ensure everybody has access. You can also open your browser and go to tejoin.com. There's a 9-digit code on the last screen. Erin, don't move back, and somebody can let us know if they need that mode. Otherwise, I'll be quiet. I'll give you 2 minutes and 45 seconds to share your thoughts and read and rate the thoughts of others. Awesome. If you haven't yet moved to the rating or the star step, I'm going to have you do that now. As you can see, the thoughts are moving up and down on the screen as the rating patterns change. So we're prioritizing right now what's most important. So in about 3 minutes, you've added 16 thoughts there, 81 ratings, 84 ratings, 85 ratings. So this is a very quick and efficient way to have conversations at scale. It's going to help with decision making. It's going to help keep people informed. It's going to involve all stakeholders in decisions that affect them. Think about using this in the context of the referendum. You could use this at the board level For example, to ask something along the lines of, what are some things we should consider to ensure our communication strategy is as successful as possible, right? You could then use this at the community level, for example, to ask something along the lines of, what are your thoughts and questions about the upcoming referendum, right? What additional support, including resources, would be helpful in sharing information about the possible closing of John Lyman Elementary? So lots of different opportunities to use this to connect with stakeholders on a small and large scale. So here we are, the exchange is now closed, over 141 ratings over a 3-minute period. Erin, if you want to just click on the top thought here, we won't dig in, but generally if we were doing this in a live setting like we just did, we will actually use these ratings to prioritize where we spend our time, and we would dig into the top thoughts more often. This is a lovely top thought and a great way to kind of end the evening. I think more importantly, though, we want to turn it over to you and see if you have any questions about Thought Exchange in general, the process you just experienced, or how we might be helpful with this referendum.
All right. I really like it, and I think this would be. I'm sorry. My name is Bob Yamartino. Hi. I'll turn my camera back on. Hi. I think it's very interesting and very exciting, and I think it'd be a great way to grab a pulse check and could help inform on which topics we focus our messages on. But I do have one question and concern. I have some access to some analysis that was done on the last referendum we took. And that referendum showed that 70.5% of the people that actually voted in the town of Middlefield were over the age of 50. So many of them didn't even have children in the school district, yet the referendum failed in Middlefield. So given that both of our towns have an older population, and we saw that 70.5% of those that came out and voted were over the age of 50, what is the demographic that is most likely to interact with Thought Exchange? Will I be getting to that target? Will I be getting the impressions of the people in their 60s and 70s and 80s?
That's a great question. The short answer is if my mother, who is 74, can participate in a Thought Exchange, almost anybody who has access to a device can. But I also hear that concern, and it's something that we've come across from time to time, for sure, when there are large community votes and you need to get the older senior population involved. We have a number of best practices of how we can coach and support on that communication rollout based on some of the ways that you already know and do things. And we also have seen things, granted this year maybe a little bit different with COVID, but there's been programs in the past where we've had like Seniors for Seniors. So the seniors of the high schools and the communities go around to whether it be senior citizen homes or places where there might be gathering. Again, COVID related, it's something to consider. We've also seen posters or radio ads or postcards being sent in the mail with the information. So there's definitely ways that we can help support based on what we've seen from across the country in other situations, whether it be going out for bond or big capital projects, that we can definitely bring some expertise to. I don't know if that answers your question in as much detail as you're looking for.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the idea about the Seniors for Seniors and some of the ways of getting the message out. And I know that there are some seniors that are very adept at utilizing the technology. I also know there are many that are not. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything that shows what the demographics, like a breakdown by age groups that actually routinely participate in Thought Exchange?
Like as a whole, you're talking about across the country,
or when you go out to communities like we're going to, like an engagement like this one,
Yeah.
what is the tip, or even do you have specifics on, like, have we ever done a survey where we asked the people what their ages were?
Yes.
And then we can gauge. So even if it's RSD13 specific, that would be even better.
Mm-hmm. So what you didn't see here tonight, because we kept this pretty simple for given our time together, we do have the option within the platform to ask up to 10 typical sort of closed-ended survey questions. Of that can be demographic questions. So which community do you live in? Please describe the role that best describes you in the community. Are you staff? Are you parent or guardian? Are you community member? You can certainly ask age demographics if that data is important to you. And what that allows you to do on the analysis side with the tools which are in real time as the exchange is live, is that you can then pull out and see, okay, my demographic group from age 55 to 70, they're rating these thoughts really high. This is really important to them. And these thoughts are really, really low. So now I can now target this group and be able to allocate my resources, inform a little bit more, understand what the information is that they need to know in order to be informed in the best way possible when they show up to vote on voting day. So we can get a lot more specific and then really lean on the analytics and the tools available to pull those insights out.
Erin, did I see a phone number? Was there the option for someone to call in if they wanted to?
No, because it is a confidential, your identity is not associated with your thoughts. So unfortunately, no, there isn't a call-in option where a number could be identified. Oh, Victor, I see your mouth moving, but you're
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. The question that came to my mind, and I didn't quite understand your answer, is determine that the girls who have answered your survey have different concerns from younger people.
I don't know if it's on my end, but your audio is chopping up and I'm having a hard time hearing you.
No, it's on his end.
Okay.
Okay, how can you know what percentage of the 70-year-olds or 50-year-olds that answered your survey? I'm sorry, what percentage of the people in town actually answered the survey by age?
So if you have your own, so this is a voluntary, obviously, participation. You will do your part to get the word out there and put it on social media and your channels that you currently use to communicate with your stakeholders. In terms of finding out the percentage of the population, we can look to see the total number of who's participating. If you are asking demographic questions to break down age groups, we can see that. Then I would say you would probably have to mirror that along those demographics of the community itself and see how that goes side by side. Again, it's not, we would love and hope that everybody in the community participates. The reality is probably not everybody will. But you can certainly have a look at those numbers and the breakdown of it and compare it with that demographic information of the community. Does that answer your question?
Bob asked before, you've been doing this for a while. What has been your experience about the rate of participation of the very experienced citizens as compared to the life inexperienced citizens? Do you have any data from all of your work before about whether we can expect any percentage, any substantial percentage of the voters who rejected that proposal in Middlefield to actually participate in thought exchange?
So I'm just going to repeat back what I think I'm hearing just to make sure that I'm on the right page. So what I think you're asking me is, you're wondering if we can find out the exact percentage of a specific age demographic and that number of which they've participated based on our work throughout the country. And if we have a high number of that, am I understanding your question correctly?
Yes, I think we'd like to know whether in fact you have been successful at reaching people in that older demographic.
Perfect. Thank you for saying that. I don't have that answer off the top of my head, and I would be happy to dig that up for you and share that and let you know. We have done a number of support through exchanges on bonds and referendums. In fact, that's sort of how we started a decade ago, was in bond work. And we've since, the tool itself has since grown to be quite nimble. And like technology is moving faster than any of us, is becoming quite powerful in the utility itself. So it's become easier for more demographics to be involved and to use it in more of a variety of settings, not just these big, large projects, even just what we did right now if we wanted to prioritize what we wanted to talk about. So I can certainly take that as an action item for myself and have a look at our data and see what I can find out and share that back with you.
Thank you. Could I ask a second question that's not a follow-up for Bob's?
Absolutely.
The unexpected fortune of your getting to sit through our more general discussion of the whole process we are going through. I'm sure you didn't plan that, but having experienced it, can you suggest to us ways that, now that you know our group and the problems that we're dealing with, how we might best use you and what you might accomplish for us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the suggestions is to even just it kind of came up already, to go out fairly soon here and just take a temperature check. What is the pulse of your communities? Where is their current knowledge based on the work you've already done, based on the conversations here tonight, knowing that this is a public forum and this is, other people are able to watch and access this, knowing what's happening on social media and the history, where is everybody at? And just get a general pulse check of that, and then be able to look at the results and glean for insights, and then use that to help inform some next steps. And an exchange is not really just a one-time thing and then you're done. It's an iterative process. And so as you find out information, as you learn the sentiment, the thoughts, the questions of your community, that can take you on a variety of different paths to maybe create an FAQ about the referendum. Perhaps there's some stuff that you need to discuss with the staff of the schools because they have a lot of burning questions that you need to address with them. There's more sentiment. Maybe there's some narratives that need to be gently corrected because the wrong information has gotten out there, and now there's an opportunity that you can address that with the correct data so everybody is informed. So through that process, we would suggest, and we're here to support along the way, a series of exchanges to help get to some of those, uncover some of those learnings.
Have you dealt specifically with situations where a referendum was being brought to a vote in the past?
Mm-hmm. Yes. We deal extensively with budget votes. We deal extensively with grade configuration, with bonds, with levies, any sort of big specific capital projects or renovations. We've worked alongside when there's been architecture firms that have come in, or PR firms for that, just to help bolster the process and to really the beautiful thing about Thought Exchange is the effectiveness and the timeliness in terms of it's efficient, it's quick. You can have, we just had a conversation in 3 minutes, and we're able to get a lot of insights of people that aren't even on this call right now, what some of their silver linings are. And it was really beautiful to see some of that sentiment. So yes, there's, I kind of lost my train of thought here as I thought about that silver lining, to be honest, because there was some lovely things in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We do have a and I'm not sure, Kristen, you could even speak more to this, that we have, for lack of a better word, webinar or virtual events called Discover Thought Exchange, where you can learn even more, be in real time with other people who are learning for their own reasons. That we'd be happy to share the information with Doug to pass on to you if it's something that you wanted to lean in and learn more about, just to understand if this is the right direction to go. And like Doug said, this is something that already exists within the district. So whether you choose to use it for this conversation and this initiative, or there's lighter touches or other priorities, we are here and able to support.
I think it would be a great tool to help us get our message out and to hear what people's questions are and what they're thinking and what they're feeling. My question is, since you do tend to put them out and then close them, is it something that can be done as a link from like our main website that stays open for a much longer, broader period of time throughout the process? To gather thoughts and ideas? How does that work and what does that look like?
Absolutely, great question. We participated in a live exchange tonight where we held a certain amount of time and space for it and then closed it. That's one way. The other way, just like Kristen had dropped the link in the chat for those of you who clicked it, you can do that and share that out through your existing communication channels, drop it in social media, put it on your district website, and have an exchange open for a determined amount of time. Generally, we like to say 7 to 10 days. Since COVID, we've also seen exchanges run for about 5 days because people are in the need to make quick decisions while they're in this change management and move and pivot quickly. So take that with a 5 to 14 days sort of window to keep an exchange open. The exchange itself is iterative. So you go in, you share your thoughts, you rate the thoughts of others, and then we encourage you to send out reminders halfway through so that people can come back in, read more thoughts, maybe have a different thought that they want to add, and keep that conversation going. So you really are getting a depth and breadth of people's sentiment and perspectives and thoughts and ideas.
If you're also holding public hearings, you can also use a live exchange like we just did to manage thoughts and questions live in real time, so that you're covering what the group deems as their highest priority burning questions. So think of it in that respect too. It can keep things really organized, really targeted.
Could I just ask a technical question? Can you identify, if you will, duplicate entries?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes, if the duplicate entry is the exact same from the same IP address or person. We actually just added that feature in not too long ago. So it's part of our moderation settings. Great question.
Yeah, we often, we do a lot of student voice exchanges and run exchanges in schools. And so sometimes when we're running them for middle school, we'll see a lot of thoughts about Minecraft repetitively over and over and over again. So yes, that feature is helpful for those things specifically.
And we really haven't touched on, the analytical side of things, but we have a wonderful suite of analytical tools that really help you dig into the conversation. Heat maps and word clouds and AI themes, and then communication tools that will help communicate back out. Erin mentioned FAQs. You can generate that from within the platform. Summary reports that can then be linked to your website. Slide decks that you can present back in a live setting, all with a very light touch.
Well, I'd just like to point out to the board that we can be guided in using those tools by Dr. Taylor, whose research lives in multivariate analysis of medical best practice, and who once presented a background at our Zoom meeting, which was a cluster map. sort of like visually like the ones that you showed. So those of us who are less than fully comfortable there have an interpreter in Dr. Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Dr. Taylor, I'm volunteering you.
It's okay, Victor.
And just because Kristen brought up word cloud, and I am feeling the warm and fuzzies from the sentiment of that exchange we ran, I will just share this word cloud from the exchange and a few of the words that are popping out.
And this, what Erin's showing here is based on your ratings. So family and time are the biggest words. That's not because family was necessarily mentioned a lot, but that thought was rated, thoughts with the word family were rated high. We can also switch the word cloud to look at frequency as well. And oftentimes you'll see a big change. Family and time still quite large. You don't see that often.
So I've done work where we've pulled Twitter feeds down offline and used sentiment analysis to determine whether they were favorable or unfavorable comments about our company and our competitors and some of our lines of business and some of our products. And it's one of the projects I had worked on. Something like time and family can come up in everyone's conversation, but half of the people can be saying, I'm so glad I don't see my family, while the others are saying, I'm so glad I can be with my family. Do you qualify these word clouds with the sentiment analysis as well? Like look at the ones that were positive, what would the word cloud was for the positive sentiment versus the negative sentiment?
Yes, we have tools that we can help pull that out. One of the tools that we have is, it's called a differences tool. So you can actually see how star rating patterns are informing some of these thoughts and how they're rising to the top and how they're aligning, as well as where there might be differences on that thought. And demographic questions as well can also be helpful there too, so you can get a sense of where that is and where you might need to do some work and maybe inform some of your next steps. What we'll also do, just so you can see sort of the full circle, if we were to use this exchange we ran tonight as a bit of a practice, Kristen and I will wrap this up in a summary report, which is part of the platform, and deliver that to Doug, and he can share that out with you, just so you could see what closing the loop on an exchange looks like. We feel very strongly and deeply as it is important to go out and ask your community these important questions, it's also important to bookend it and end transparently with sharing and your findings of what you've learned and informing how this is contributing to your next steps. So we'll do that on our end so you can see what that would look like should you do that as well. And be able to have some of these tools that we've shared very briefly here tonight available for everybody to have a look in and see the full breadth of the conversation.
Any final thoughts? Well, Erin and Kristen, thank you for being here. You have a lot of patience sitting through that hour and a half in the beginning, but I think you've certainly done a great job highlighting Thought Exchange. I used it at ACES earlier last year. You might have had something to do with that, and it's a great tool. It really brings it home. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Good night.
Okay, next item on the agenda is discussion on Corn School Building.
Well, can we continue with this discussion on this? I'm sorry, this is taking a while, and
That's all right. Go ahead.
Take a while, but I do think
I had a feeling we were good, but if you want to continue.
No, because I don't think it's cool. I think we have if I'm going to, if we're going to go back to utilization and we're going to start taking things forward, I think that there's way too many questions in the air at this point. And I think we need some directives on what we're doing. So one thing I did want to comment on, I think Thought Exchange is a beautiful system for being able to do information gathering. But it's not clear to me, and I think it was borne out by what they were skirting around, is that this is not a survey company. They're not going to be able to get us accurate numbers on the pulse of the two towns as far as the possibility of success or failure of the vote. So that's one thing. I also did not get the impression that they are a marketing firm slash, what I would say maybe is a traditional PR firm. And I think what we really need now is somebody to help us with dissemination of information out through multiple mediums. I know that can be accomplished through our district administration, but honestly, I don't want them to, because I want them to be dedicated to our students and doing learning. And I think that this is something that we should offload on somebody else to accomplish that task. And I think it's important enough of an issue, considering that we're talking about millions and millions of dollars into the future, that we should dedicate the resources and make that happen. And then the third thing I would say is still about the timing issue. And I only bring this up at this point now, is that I don't know, when we go back into the utilization meeting, what is going to be the discussion about, do we need to hire somebody next day? And this is part of my concerns about not setting a particular date, is we're hampered and we will be in continual discussion about, and conflict potentially about, how fast do we actually need to move, and where do we need to compromise on the potential of even going out and searching for PR firms. If we feel like, if we're trying to maximally move, then you may take the first PR firm that comes around. If you're trying to maximize the process of success, you may need to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get multiple PR firms and discussions and talk and everything else, and that requires multiple meetings to make that happen. So I think, and it's not clear to me what the directive is within utilization to move forward. And so I would just ask that we have that conversation now, so that we know how to move in the next month to month and a half.
Andrew, I agree with what you said in terms of needing to have the direction. And in fact, I'm not sure if it requires board approval right now, because I think there's some money available in professional services that might be available to hire a PR firm, or if we would need to have a board motion to transfer funds in order to affect that. And that is something I'd be interested in getting done tonight, if we are going to move forward with an outside agency to help us with the communications. So I would definitely want to see that moved tonight. So I guess my question would be directed at Kim and or Doug. What does the board need to do to provide you the resources so that we can authorize Bob Moore to go out and hire a firm to engage them?
So we do have funds in professional services that we are not going to expend this year. So would not need a line item transfer. It would just be a directive from the board that this is the way that you'd like to move.
Okay, and is it okay? Well, I'll make a motion that we authorize Bob Moore and Doug to move forward with engaging a firm for the purpose of communication of this objective. I'll make that motion. If people are in agreement, second it, we'll pass it. We can have discussion. We have a second from Victor. Thank you, Victor. Is there any discussion on that?
Don't you think that we would want to meet the marketing firm? I'm just saying, because if I was told, oh, we're going to go forward with Thought Exchange, because honestly, I thought they were going to be different than what they presented this evening, I would be disappointed. Like, I really think we need a full-on like PR firm. I actually emailed everybody during it because it wasn't what I had thought, and I really wanted us. We clearly need help with the communication piece of this. So I mean, I don't know. I just thought, like, as a board, we would want to make sure that we hire the right firm. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Well, I had asked if we should form a communication committee, and I was told that maybe we don't quite need a communication committee, but if there's a group here that would like, I personally don't think I have the time to interview firms that do this kind of work. I'm not sure who else does. And if you do and you have an interest, have at it.
Or maybe just like review the proposals. Like, I don't know what's entailed, you know, like I also don't want to be fiscally responsible as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with Christine. If you, at least, and when Doug and Bob do reach out to the PR firms, it would be nice to get the information about each PR firm and allow us to be able to either voice concerns or, you know, whatnot. I don't know if we need to have another board meeting just to bring it back, you know, and make a firm commitment on that front. I would say, and the reason why I was opposed to having a committee is that I don't want to drag this process out, and in forming another committee to do something just doesn't, I think, accomplish what we need to do in the short time frame. But I agree that we need, I mean, it would be nice to at least have the information so that we can at least guide Doug and Bob about kind of what we're thinking that needs to happen from a PR perspective.
So I think actually that authorizing Bob now is the right thing to do. We trust him, and I think he can understand that we would like to know that he's consulting with members, including making opportunities for people to attend interviews when they can. But I also agree that another committee is committees are death to progress, as we have found in the multi-year process that we've been engaged in so far. So I think I seconded that motion, and I was thinking at the time that Bob was not just going to run out and do something, but when the moment comes that he feels it's time to do something, I'd like for him to be able to.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, Figure.
Bob went out and researched for the firms for hiring the superintendent. If I remember correctly, I don't have as good a memory as some of you do. And he brought who he felt might work for us in terms of which organization might, you know, meet our needs. And then I believe we then made that decision. So I think we can trust Bob to go out and if he doesn't mind, to do some research and find some 1, 2, maybe 3 companies that he thinks might work, and, you know, share it with us, and we decide, and that's it.
I don't at all.
That this motion on the floor is related to item number 6 on the agenda.
I don't at all question the benefits of a PR agency, but I worry about public perception of why does a Board of Education need to hire a PR firm? It just sounds a little bit too sort of bureaucracy, big government, a little slick perhaps. Again, the science is great, the data would be wonderful. To think back to Howard Kelly's days, in the old days, going back to the old days, it would be, let's have a gathering, be passionate about the cause, keep it simple, explain it, get it done. September, when people are engaged, that's the time to do it. I'm not for a PR firm, honestly. I really not. Not debating the benefits, and I know there's a lot of money involved. I'm worried about the perception in the community.
May I point out that the towns have changed since those days?
I'm sorry, Victor, what? You broke up again.
I'd just like to remark that the towns have changed rather profoundly since those days.
We
in
had
terms of what-
we had closed schools before, Victor. We had center school. Now the community.
No, I mean that people's willingness to participate in that sort of activity, like just all getting together, has declined precipitously.
Yeah,
As
I'm
our
hoping.
population has changed.
I'm hoping in the fall. I mean, there is some level of community engagement. We have important things like Powder Ridge was a very good thing. Who knows what's going to happen in the fall as far as our ability to gather? That is always a big unknown. So, will it be like this or not? I'm not sure, but not opposed to the PR firm. Not opposed to it at all.
No, but Jamie, the other thing is, if this were just a simple issue, I'd agree with you. We could craft the message and hit it home. This is not a simple issue. It's a complex issue. It's very complex. In fact, I had shared some thoughts and notes with a group of people, and the feedback I got before I shared it with the public, which I never did share with the public, was people got very different impressions from what I was intending to say, depending on who was reading it. And when I say a PR firm, I'm really talking about a firm that's skilled in communication, because I may say something one way and it gets perceived very differently. And everybody who has my background and my training understands exactly what I'm saying, okay, and getting the message 100%. But not everybody in the community has my background and my thoughts, just like I don't have theirs. And that's why a professional firm that's skilled at providing communications to the public that clearly and concisely, and we all know I'm not the most concise person, that they are the ones that are trained to do it and they can help it. And in Victor, I'm sorry, Norm, I thought we were talking about resources now, and this is a resource. And I thought that's where we were in the agenda.
It's as long as it's connected to item 6, I'm fine with it.
From this point forward, we will not say PR firm anymore. Done. Then I'm good.
No, I'm not afraid of using that word. I'm just saying I'm looking for people that have those skills and talents that I know I don't have, or I think I have, but I obviously failed at that task. And I'm sure every one of you that wrote down what this was all about, you would fail to communicate it to half of the people in the town. We need to communicate to all the people.
I favor the term information dissemination service.
All right, so there's a motion to move forward, allow Bob Moore and Doug Shook to find an IDS for us.
And who was
And
the
we
second?
had a second. We have a second
All
from,
right.
from Victor.
Is there further discussion?
I just wanted to comment quick that I remember probably going back 9 years now when my older daughter was still in preschool. And I remember going to several informational sessions at the high school that maybe weren't run by a PR firm, but it wasn't just the Board of Ed speaking. Maybe it would have been the people that ran all those studies and things like that. But I just think that it will be helpful for us to have someone help us with the communication.
I was on the board then, as was Norm. That was part of the package. They analyzed, developed plans, and part of the package was that they presented them to the community. Am I right about that, Norm?
No, that's correct.
They presented.
And they did it, I think, better than we would have done it if we just done it ourselves, because they'd been there before.
And that's what they earn a living doing. Anyone else? Further discussion? All right. Motion to authorize Doug and Bob. I'm sorry, I've got Victor's name down for some reason or other. Victor, I think you've been promoted. To To engage,
Victor seconded the motion.
to engage a firm yet to be described. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposition? I see no one in opposition, therefore the motion has passed. Anything else on item 6? Before we move on to item 7. All right. Now we'll try item 7, discussion on Corn School Building. A number of things going on out there. Who'd like to start off?
Well, I was awaiting. I understand that there's been an official response. I think we discussed at our last meeting that the Board of Selectmen have elected to not go forward. And my understanding is there's a drive in town to collect signatures on a petition to ask them to reconsider. But at this point, they are not moving forward with Corn School. I think that leaves the board in a position where we need to, based on prior discussions, move forward with discussions about how we would move forward with a potential demolition and how we would fund that. And I feel that given the late hour and the lack of any real changes since the last meeting, that maybe we delay this for another meeting. So I'd make a motion that we table this discussion to another meeting unless someone has something more permanent, but I'd like to make that motion.
Could I just ask? Could we rephrase that to postpone because there's no motion on the floor?
Yeah, I'd make a motion.
Postpone discussion, that's all. As a matter of fact, we don't really have to take any action at all.
To postpone the discussion. Okay.
We can just move it on. Anyone else, anything else? Victor, would you like to comment?
I just have a question. The next step involves, I believe in the end, will involve a bond referendum. I just would like to know what the steps would be for us to craft a bond referendum. And that's to Kim and to Bob probably. So I'm asking about the process of getting there. Kim, you've got quotes for, can you hear me? You've got quotes for, or can get quotes for demolishing the building?
Yes,
what else?
That is true.
How does those quotes translate themselves into a bond referendum? And I'm assuming that we go that way. I understand we haven't decided, but I'd just like to know a time schedule.
Yeah, so with the quotes, then we would know the amount of money that we would need to bond in order to demolish the building. So from that, then we would need to force a question to a referendum about a bonding issue with the proper 30 days notice. Again, the same rules apply with district resources. Once you send it to referendum, you cannot advocate for or against, just give facts. Once that is approved, then we go out to we go out to bid and get a timeline of demolition, and then we issue the bonds. So, it can be done probably in 3 months, but you would structure it so that it wouldn't hit the debt service until the following year. So it does not need to impact our 21-22 budget. It would then be in the 22-23 budget where our first debt payment would be made. So
basically, if the bond referendum were part of the package for the November election, we're fine in terms of the timing of things. Is that right? Is there any reason for us? Yeah.
We may not want to put a bonding referendum on November. We may or may not, because it's a different group. And I think property owners vote at town hall or something. There's something that's different, but it could confuse the issue a little bit. But I think it's been done in the past. So I think we'd want to explore that with our registrar of voters before we move forward with that.
So I just really was asking the question, are we in a hurry? And I think the answer is no. And we will have to deal with the question of whether we want the referendum to be on the same ballot or whether it even can be on the same ballot. But we don't have to decide that tonight. True?
Yeah, true.
Anyone else? Okay, are we set to move forward?
Yes.
That's the last item on the agenda. As far as
Motion to adjourn.
no, we want to talk about public comment.
Oh, sorry.
Is there any public comment? Anybody
Nope,
on the line?
in the Zoom.
I'm sorry?
I don't see anybody in the Zoom.
I guess there's no public comment. So item 9 is adjournment. Bob?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made to
Second.
adjourn, seconded by Victor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much, and stay safe, everyone.